Nihal's got the ingredients that he needs to beat someone amazing. It's just that he's gotten the positions he's wanted, Robert. Let's take out the silver lining for Nihal. He's been better with white consistently. He just has failed to deliver on his opportunities.
Okay, here's the critical moment. Knight 4 to f3 is played in one game, bishop e2 in another. But for Hikaru, the bishop's on e7 rather than on d6. So that's another difference. Knight c4 doesn't come with the tempo. He plays it anyway. That does allow black to play the move b5. But what Nihal will do is swap on c6, bring a knight to e5 instead, and just claim that he has the superior minor pieces in this position.
By the way, just to clarify, I didn't mean to call Fabiano Caruana an amateur. He's an absolute legend. I have the utmost respect for him. But it's just what people like Hikaru and Magnus are able to achieve. It's that crazy effect when someone who normally victimizes other players just ends up being the one who's victimized. And Hikaru, do you think he looked this up, or do you think he's just kind of being stubborn?
Well, I thought he might have looked it up because he went bishop e7, but now he's sitting here and thinking. And what can happen at times is we see the evaluation went from a slight plus for white to zeros. This could be like the third or the fourth best move. And when you don't have that much time to look at an opening, when someone plays the third move, you probably haven't looked at it. It's too far down in the computer's rankings. It's a perfectly good move, but Hikaru seems stuck.
He does, and the knights are definitely unstuck. They're all over the center. Knight f6 to d5, which is a very natural move. Hikaru preparing to play bishop f6 and ultimately neutralize the bishop on b2, which is the real path to equality here. But Nihal preparing to annihilate this knight, take it off the board, and get a dream IQP structure.
Look at the bishop on d7 compared to the bishop on f3. Earlier in this match, you mentioned the dark square bishops. It's also the light square bishops. That's what makes this opening have much more teeth than one would initially think. Bishop c6, trying to counter the bishop on f3, is met with knight to e5, just attacking that bishop in its place. So I feel like Nihal's everything he could possibly dream of out of the opening.
Yep.
Not that the advantage is that significant. It just is much more pleasant to play.
I feel like it's been 0.4, specifically 0.4 out of every opening. It's like such a frustrating eval. Like, it's not 0.6, it's not +1, it's 0.4. It's a little bit better position, but how do you actually improve?
And I think that Hikaru is perfectly okay being in this situation game after game because his defense is among the best. There was recently this video that he did with chess.com where they asked him to rank himself out of 100, and he said his defense is 99. And I think he's even selling himself a little short there. His
modest.
Defense is as great gets. He is like probably the best defender in the entire world, and he just does not go down without swinging. Maybe he should start chess boxing.
Yeah, I mean, stop underselling yourself, Hikaru. Come on. He's like that. Gosh. Yeah, he's like that kid who says, I did terribly on my test. I got a question wrong. What did you get? 98, 99.
Yeah, right? Everybody hated that kid, and everybody hates playing Hikaru because he just is that good.
And what's funny is I actually failed a test in 5th grade where we had a blank map of the United States, and we had to label all the states because I was at a chess tournament and I wasn't studying. And once I took the test, I immediately knew that I failed. And of course, that's precisely when I was talking to my friend who was complaining, and he says, I feel you, Daniel. I forgot where North Dakota was, but I knew where all the other states were. That did not make me any happier.
Oh, good old North Dakota. Well, right here, the rook on c8 coming towards the center, just like North Dakota in the country, coming to the center of the chessboard here.
Oh, you managed to connect everything to the chess. That is like the ultimate talent.
Well, you and I have a commentary connection, so sometimes we got to talk about other things. Other times we got to focus on the chess. But here, queen to d2, connecting the rooks from f1 to c1. And this position is just going to remain in this like slightly better for white, slightly better for black, totally equal territory. And it's coming up with a plan because right now we have only 2 pawns and 1 pair of knights traded. What is the actual plan for each side? Your point at queen b2, that looks good for white. What does black have in store?
Yeah, well, at first you might think you want to banish the knight to North Dakota after b5. The problem is the knight's going to go to Manhattan with knight c4 to e5, chasing away the bishop. You made a point earlier. b5 is on the board, and the eval bar is skeptical. There's also the move knight to b6 here, trying to secure the bishop pair, but there, after knight takes b6, bishop c6, you have to be very careful about e5. That queen is going to be undefended once the knight moves away from c4. So I'm sticking by knight e5. Hikaru will drop his bishop back to b7, and he'll politely ask white, again, the topical question, how are you going to improve?
I don't have an answer to that question, but I am working on myself and my understanding of the game of chess. But knight e5, it just looks great. Eventually it can be kicked out with f6. So it won't stay there forever, even if it has prime real estate in the center of the board. So maybe knight e5, bishop b7, and rook takes c8 and rook c1. Quickly take over the c file, and you're exactly what you're pointing out. You try to take control of the c6 square.
Climb that Empire State Building, knight on e5. Rook takes c8, I think, is a must. If you don't play it, that ship will sail very quickly. And you pointed out the move f6. The moment White's knight is driven out of e5, White's grasp on the position really loosens. Alternatively, though, you could play knight d3 on your own volition and kind of Catalan style try to take over that square on c5. So possibilities here for Nihal. I think rook takes c8 and rook c1 is too juicy to refuse, though.
Knight d3 feels like the ultimate Peter Lecco move, right? Like get the smallest advantage, but take control of important squares.
If we bring up an analysis board here really fast, I think what might be giving Nihal the heebie-jeebies here is that after rook c1, queen d8, knight c6, looks like everything's going according to plan. But if I have this calculated correctly, knight b4 is actually a super nasty move. Our old friend e5 pays us a visit. The bishop can drop back to c3, but at the end, you actually lose that a2 pawn. I think you lose your advantage in the endgame. And so Nihal, after a period of long thought, goes Peter Lecco mode and plays knight d3. Back to the live board.
Yeah, great move, knight to d3. It's saying, I could try to get the bishop pair, but maybe I'll do it in a better way. Knight to c5, that's a juicy square. And that's what happens when you extend pawns too much. a6 and b5. What squares that give up? c6, we've been mentioning, also c5. There's a bishop on d4, a rook on c1. Give me that square. I'm taking control of b4 as well. I love that move from Nihal, and I feel like that's going to create some issues for Hikaru.
And it's important to beat black to the punch, because if you had waited for f6, then Hikaru would have been able to follow up with e5. And again, your grasp on the c5 square would have been loosened if the bishop would have been forced to drop back to a1, let alone all of the tactics you would have opened yourself up to on the d file. If Hikaru plays f6 here, you drop your knight into c5, simultaneously hitting the bishop and the pawn, and then you force black to give away the dark squared bishop. That's the nightmare scenario for black.
Yeah, f6 would be a terrible blunder at this moment. So Hikaru needs to find another move. Bishop f6 or something like that still gives up the c5 square. Bishop a3 can often be met by bishop to b2. Let's trade those dark square bishops because c5 is mine. So it's a moment for Hikaru to recognize that the c5 square is firmly under his opponent's control, and it's not going to be easy to deal with.
Not at all. I don't think you can deal with knight c5 itself. Maybe you can try to take the sting out of it and drop the bishop back to a8, but that is not an easy move to play. We're back to point 4 on the eval bar, and it's crept up. And wait, doesn't Nihal want to go knight c5? Is h3 really that mission critical, Robert?
I don't think it was critical, but he's saying, Hikaru, show me your next move, right? h6 took him forever to play.
Rook e8.
So, right, there's going to be some kind of quiet follow-up. It's going to take Hikaru 20 seconds to play. He plays bishop
or
a3,
not.
but bishop b2. Let's trade the dark square bishops. The whole point is the c5 square wants to be under White's control. You can play b4 at some point in the future. Give me the c5 square. I want it, and I want it now.
But I'm going to backseat drive a little bit here. I really think h3 was a lazy move by Nihal. I think he went into that mode of trying to milk Hikaru's clock down, and that doesn't usually work against him. I feel like right about now he's regretting not playing knight c5, but he might make me eat my words because that bishop on a3 has seen better days.
Oh my gosh, actually, you can put a bishop on c5 and say your bishop's not getting out of there. Yeah. And even if you don't win the piece, you're just going to play around it. And so what can black do? I think rook d8 makes sense, just trying to put a piece on the d file. But as you're pointing out, rook b1 to b3 looks very tempting.
And rook b1 now is even more tempting because it simultaneously defends b4. You have to, I think, resist the temptation to play bishop c5 because that invites the move rook d8, although knight e5 in that position comes within a millimeter of trapping the queen. I think it's only because black has the h4 square that he stays alive.
And something very important to note is the knight on d5 is pinned. So if this knight remains stuck in place, you can't actually take on b4. So the pawn on b4 is not really threatened in many of these positions, and rook b1 takes care of it all at once.
That's the move.
Rook b1, rook b3 looks very natural and very strong.
He has to see rook b1, and he had to see it yesterday because he's down to 40 seconds. And again, this is entering the realm of a time scramble. Rook b1 is natural, it's strong, and it puts Hikaru in dire straits.
And you might play a5 to free the bishop, but then you hand white a pass pawn.
There
he takes a5. He plays rook b1. He took quite a long think there, almost a minute. Rook c8 by Hikaru. Rook b3, give me that bishop. Is bishop c1 available right now?
Not only available, I think it's forced. And is Nihal going to take and go into the endgame? No, he's going to keep that bishop stranded on c1. And I feel like Hikaru, he has to use some sort of weird tactics to extricate that bishop. He tries to use the queen trade to diminish the pressure on the bishop.
I think you don't want that rook entering on c2. At least that's how it looks to me. So bishop c5. Remember, the bishop on f3 defends the queen on d1. So at least here,
Knight c5.
Because knight c5 going for the bishop on b7 makes perfect sense. The bishop on c1 still kind of trapped in there. So king f1, king e2 is a bit of a long story, but maybe the king can enter the position. It could trap the bishop on c1.
God, Hikaru is balancing on the trapeze here. Somehow the bishop is not only alive, but could even inflict some damage on white's pawns. With a well-timed bishop
d3, knight d3,
knight d3,
double attack.
Piece. You
double
got it,
attack.
what a spot. And black will have to go bishop d5. He missed it. He missed it.
Oh my gosh. He plays bishop f3, still looking pretty decent for white.
Oh, yeah.
But he's missing tactics.
You cannot miss a one-move tactic against Hikaru and hope to win this match. I think Hikaru is back in the game, and he's got an initiative now. And this is a, once again, 3-result game.
Everything possible. The knight c5 is loose. If ba5, the knight c5 is loose. a4.
That's a bailout move. That's a total bailout move. Hikaru can trade both of these pawns and make a draw.
But the e5 pawn also is a bit loose, so black needs to keep an eye on that.
Bishop
bishop on c1 still awkward. It does finally get out, and don't play bishop f8 because bishop b4
And now watch for knight d6. White's minor pieces, Robert, are very awkward on the queen side. You could lose a piece here in the blink of an eye.
Thankfully, the a5 score is covered. Knight a3. Hikaru trying to win this game.
Yep. And Nihal holding on for dear life at this point.
Bringing all of his pieces back.
Yeah, rook a1. Oh, and then king has to drop back to e2. Barely hanging on, but I think he's going to hold it. e4 check was possible there.
And look at Nihal go. He's out of it. The worst is behind him.
Yeah, knight c3, and there we go. It's a draw.
And Hikaru down to a few seconds himself. What if
Nihal
doesn't want to
showing?
Draw?
Maybe he doesn't.
He
pushes
doesn't.
g5.
Oh my gosh, king g4. Here comes the king.
And king g6 blunders the pawn on e5.
Hikaru did it. Oh my gosh, he barely got the move off. He had 0.8 seconds when he made the move. Bishop g3. Keep more pieces in the way. There's a pass pawn for white. e4.
And you push it. e4, try to get it to e5. Nihal
Rook
defends it
e6
with
maybe?
f3.
He wants rook d5.
d5.
Rook d5.
And the bishop endgame was winning. Now the pawn moves forward to e5. Nihal making progress.
Really
rook
scary
d7,
for Hikaru.
Rook b7. Rook b7.
Oh, he could have pinned him.
Oh, he blundered the rook.
Oh my gosh! He blunders a rook on e1, it resigns, and Nihal Sarin is right back in this match. Hikaru Nakamura cannot believe it.
What a ridiculous win in that 4v4 endgame. That was as dead as it gets. And Nihal just said h4, g4, g5. I'm breaking up the pawn structure. I'm promoting my e-pawn, and I'm winning this game.
And I feel like Hikaru kind of did it to himself, right? He was playing for a win in mutual time scramble. And if he had just accepted a draw, it would have been a split point. But instead, he plays on, and Nihal's active king and that timely g5 push earned him his first victory of the match. And now we can say it is on.